And in the co-main event, just like all three of these last three fights on the card that we're going to talk about, this fight came together pretty short notice with Brian Ortega, Diego Lopez both stepping up, agreeing to fight here. Amazing fight, man. I think both these guys kind of have similar styles, and it should be a really good clash. Obviously, Ortega, he's been at the top for a long time, and technically, I mean, he's really only lost to Max Holloway and Volkanovski, two of the last three champs in like the last almost 10 years in that weight class. His other loss to Yair obviously got injured and came back, got that win back. So to me, it maybe erases it a little bit. So Ortega's only lost to the best of the best, and Diego Lopez, he's coming up in the UFC and looking incredible. He's getting these quick finishes. He's finished three opponents in a row in the first round. Is lost to Mofsari, looked competitive even on short notice against a really good fighter. So Lopez is the real deal, and even on top of all his achievements in the cage and him personally fighting, he's become one of the best coaches in MMA as well. So he's a good mind for the sport also. But this is a hard matchup for both guys. I mean, anytime you're in there with Brian Ortega, I don't care who you are, it's not going to be an easy fight, especially when you're a finisher. And that's what Diego Lopez is. Diego Lopez is not a guy that usually wins via decision. I think he has a negative record in decisions. I know he's lost his last three decisions in a row. So finishing Brian Ortega is easier said than done. And that's what makes this fight interesting, because I think if Lopez can't get Ortega out of there in the first round, it becomes a really interesting matchup where Ortega could take over. Because early on, I do think that both these guys have similar styles where they come forward high guard boxing. But Lopez is going to be faster, more dynamic, and I think he's going to be able to land some nice 1-2s, maybe 3-2s. He has power in his hands. You could tell that he hits hard, heavy-handed guy, and his uppercut is nice. I am curious, though. I mean, he's been facing a lot of really short guys, landing that uppercut and rocking them with it, hurting them with it. But with someone like Ortega, who's going to be taller, both these guys are really big for the weight, that uppercut might not be, as impactful or as damaging, I don't think. But obviously, I think that's Diego Lopez's best strike. That uppercut in the pocket, in the clinch, and even in the pocket, or when he's at kind of like finds it whenever. He's just really good with that shot. But I feel like as the fight goes on, Ortega, his boxing isn't bad either. He has decent stand-up. He's going to keep the pressure. And the guy's a zombie. He's impossible to really get out of there with strikes. I know he's been TKO'd twice, but, one was an injury. One was a corner stoppage or doctor stoppage. So he's never really been taken out like that. And if Ortega can start to clinch up Lopez, get in on the takedown, start wrestling, I think he could hit some takedowns, man. I mean, we saw Joe Anderson Burrito, a couple years ago, beat Diego Lopez pretty easily, to be honest. I mean, Diego Lopez threw up a lot of submissions off his back, but none of them were, able to come off. And then he just got ground and pounded and ended up taking that loss. Ortega, I don't know why, if he gets on top, I don't see him getting submitted, and he could definitely ride out that position. I mean, the guy looks extremely heavy in top position and hard to get off of you. So if he gets on top of Lopez, we know, likes to play that jiu-jitsu game. He's confident right now in his finishing ability, and I don't see him catching Brian Ortega with the submission, and I think Ortega could win rounds like that on top. I also don't know how Lopez's gas tank is going to hold up in a fight where Ortega's bringing that typical Ortega pressure. So I'm just slightly leaning towards Ortega. I feel like he has more ways to win. I think that Lopez, he's not 100% relied on a finish because he could outstrike him for maybe 8 minutes, 9 minutes of the fight, or even the whole fight. Who knows? I mean, he obviously is improving all the time, but I just feel like if this fight starts to go longer, Ortega is going to be able to take over with the pressure, get the clinch, maybe get on top. And I think Lopez is going to have too much faith in his jiu-jitsu and finding that submission. And he's not going to find it. The clock's going to run out, and Ortega's going to get his hand raised as the winner. So give me Brian Ortega to win this one in a slight upset in the co-main event.